So basically, my goal is to talk a little bit about, first of all, for those who haven't heard of Vim Awesome, what it is and what it's trying to do, and then for um, those who are familiar with it or have been familiar with it and the sort of troubles that it went through, a little breakdown of sort of where it's been and where it's going now, and then hopefully try to convince some of you to come hang out in our chat or help out. So Vim Awesome is a Vim plugin index website. So this is what it looks like. I think its main value is that it gives you a sort of tally of how many people are actively using this plugin, which is basically a problem that had not been solved anywhere else. And I'll get into more of that later. And then how many stars it has on GitHub, and then some sort of rudimentary filtering. So these are popular Ruby plugins. So it's sort of fairly obvious use case of plugin discovery. So just maybe then I'll go into a little bit of sort of how it came to be. So it was a student project of, I believe it was David Hu's project. He's now at Khan Academy. And he was helped out by friends, Ben Alpert, who is at Facebook working on React, and Emily Eisenberg, who I don't know her story. But they were at, David at least was at University of Waterloo in 2014 and did it as like a senior project. And he actually wrote a really sort of in-depth paper on it. So if you ever drop by the GitHub page for Vim Awesome, you can check out the paper. It does a pretty good job of it in detail, basically going in detail the things I'm going to talk about today. So it was intended to address this issue of the fact that the vim.org list of plugins is hopelessly out of date, not necessarily in content, although that's true as well, but mostly in how people are actually using plugins. So the fact that a ecosystem of plugin managers has evolved that uses GitHub as the central repository for Vim plugins is not at all taken into account by this tool. It's factually wrong in a number of places. I think somewhere on here it claims to be sorting by one column, but it's actually sorting by a different thing. The list of popular plugins is hopelessly out of date, and so plugin discovery is basically impossible. And I don't know who here would say that the best way to discover plugins is just by like creeping on other people's dot files, right? So that's like not a great, like there's got to be a better way to do that, and I think that was David's goal. So yeah, he addressed these problems of, it's almost impossible to tell how popular a plugin is, which I think is a very important metric for discovery. It doesn't take into account the fact that plugins are essentially, GitHub is essentially the plugin repository of choice. Sorting is bad, it's out of date. So how does it work? So it basically searches GitHub for repositories that look like dot files. So it has some, I think there's some common naming conventions, like if it's called dot files, for example. And then it recurses through the various files in that looking for things that are probable vimRCs, and then uses some regex magic to pull out the common signatures of plugin managers. So it's actually aggregating for each set of dot files which plugins is this person using, and then can build a lower bound of how many people are actively using this plugin. And it's sort of doing that on an ongoing basis and updating its understanding of people's dot files. It also scrapes vim.org, which has a listing of plugins, and it tries to correlate those back to where those plugins live on GitHub. In the case of plugins that were discovered via GitHub dot files, generally the way that you declare what plugin you're using is by giving something which can be resolved to the GitHub repo. So then it can go to GitHub and scrape information about that plugin. So how many stars does it have? When was it created? When was the first commit? When was the most recent commit? Things like that. So this whole thing was started, let's see, let me go back here, in 2014. And then about a year ago, there was a terrible bug. And it had, I don't know, so who here noticed this? Anyone else aware of this sort of issue that it had? So basically, shortly after it launched, it started coming up with all these duplicates of plugins. And as you can see, the sort of usage numbers are not really the same. And so, usage numbers that were expected to be all aggregated together about how many people are using this plugin were spread off across all these duplicates. And David, who created the project, basically didn't have the time or interest to fix it. So it sat in this state for quite a while, so several months. Eventually, in December, he sort of formally admitted that he wasn't going to get around to having time to do this.
Was
Yeah.
the duplicates due to forking?
So the duplicates were due to a strict comparison of strings to determine uniqueness, where GitHub URLs are case insensitive. So that was not known at this point. So by basically saying, are these two the same plugin, look to see whether the get URL is the same string. If people in their dot files specified it using a different capitalization, then you would end up with two different plugins that both pointed to the same Git repository. So in December, he basically said, I'm not going to be able to do this. Email emacs@vimawesome.com if you're interested. I think it's a joke, but I can't say for sure. So basically, I assumed that there would be people chomping at the bit to go fix this because I think it's an amazing project. I think it's something that the community is a huge gaping hole in the community right now. So, and I had just had a baby at the time, so I was like, I don't have time to do that. But I would love to, but I don't have time. And I assumed someone else would step up. And then the beginning of the month, or a little bit, I guess in the end of February, I went to check in to see who had taken over, and nobody had. So I emailed him and said, look, if I can fix a duplicates issue, maybe I could take over. And we were able to do that. And as of a couple weeks ago, I've been sort of driving the issues and things like that. So the stack is pretty cool, actually. It's Python using Flask, using RethinkDB, which was new to me. It's interesting. I don't know whether, I think it's quite young and probably not something you would get to use at a company yet. So it's kind of cool to get to play with it. It does have some, you do sort of come up against some of its idiosyncrasies. And React, which is especially cool because it was actually the first React project that Ben Alpert wrote. And he's now, I think, the second most prolific contributor to that project, and he's working at Facebook. So he's still involved to some degree, so he's still around if you have questions. Yeah, so basically this is a excuse to try to see if anyone is interested in first of all, just using it and telling people about it, because I think there are probably some class of people who ran across it at the point when it was broken and were like, oh, well, this is shitty. So trying to say, come back, we're better now. There are a lot of things that I think we could continue to iterate on. Tim Pope, at one point a year ago, I don't know whether he's still interested or not, was basically hypothesizing that this could form a package repository database for a more robust package management and dependency system for Vim. I don't know if that's the right thing for us to do. I think you would probably want someone with significant expertise in that area because the problem is really easy to get wrong. But we're at least going to start up conversations again with him because I know he had some ideas on that. We have a Gitter chat. It's kind of an interesting place to hang out. And that's all I have. So yeah, if anyone has any questions about the project or about anything, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, what's the name of that database that he uses?
RethinkDB.
Can you give a brief description on what RethinkDB is?
Yeah, I mean, someone else may actually know more than I do. Yeah.
Actually used to work at RethinkDB.
Oh, okay. So somebody here definitely knows more than I do.
Okay. So RethinkDB is a non-SQL document store. So pretty similar to MongoDB, except that it doesn't suck.
I can actually pull up the
So,
sort of dev tool thing here.
So a couple of things that it tries to achieve first is distributed and like really easy to scale out. You can actually it's so stupid to like actually create a cluster of RethinkDB databases. Instead of like having this JSON formatted query language, it actually has this. What you do is that you have your programming language actually is the query language, as he'll probably show in a bit, right? So if you look at that, that's just JavaScript. And that is like basically what the driver does is it converts your query into a very like obscure kind of wire protocol that sends as basically as a string to the server and it gets back but so basically you interact with it through these drivers, right, for your language, which makes it like really easy to query your database, and it protects against like all the SQL injection stuff. And I'm probably talking too much.
No, this is great. I literally know only enough about it to get it to work. So
Yeah.
A big advantage of Mongo, as far as I understand, is like the concept of relations, right? Being able to join.
Yeah. So for example, you can have subqueries. You have a join. You have a join command, but it's actually kind of like I don't know. It feels like a marketing tool almost. It's like, hey, we have joins. they do work, but like the really powerful thing is that you have subqueries. So you can write queries inside queries inside queries, and which are basically you can. It's like one step closer to relational, but you don't have the sort of like SQL idea of relational where like this actually is referring to this other row somewhere else, right? It's just a string, and it just so happens to be a row. But yeah, it is a lot closer. I was going to say something else. Oh, and there's like it's also supposed to be real time, so you can, for example, listen to changes in any query that you write, which is really nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, I'll come find you afterwards and
Yeah.
see if I can ping you on PRs.
I guess any suggestions or ideas about kind of tool like that? If you have like maybe just offline or online right now,